Chair Esquivel?
Yes, I'm here.
So it looks like all of your board members are on.
Okay, great.
So-
Are there any other things that need to be taken care of back end?
If you want to go ahead and read your script again for people, what you can read for the evening session. I think Itze is going to actually also translate a little bit in Spanish like she did earlier this morning. But other than that, now we can go right into Justine's PowerPoint after that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Glad everyone could come back to join us here. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm chair of the State Water Board. This has been a day-long workshop on an update on the Salton Sea Management Program. And this is now our evening component. So I really appreciate everyone who has joined us this evening. So I will quickly just let folks know that we have interpretive services available to provide translation of the conversations that will be occurring at this workshop into Spanish. If you or someone you know would benefit from the service today, feel free to use the service here, and you can do so by at the bottom of your, well, if you're watching from one of the two streams, there is an English and Spanish version on the Cali PA website. Additionally, here, if you're on the Zoom platform with us, if you click down to the icon that says interpretation, you can select their English and or Spanish if it is the language that you would prefer, so that any speakers that are speaking Spanish, you will get an English interpretation and vice versa. So really appreciate that we have these translation services tonight. And I will kick it over to Itze in order to ensure to deliver a similar message in Spanish. So thank you, Itze.
No problem. I just want to add that if there is a public comment being stated in Spanish and those on the call would like to listen to what's being said, our oral interpreters are translating from Spanish to English, and all that those on the Zoom platform would have to do is go down to interpretation and select English in order to understand what's being said. But now I'll proceed and inform of the interpretation feature. Hola, mi nombre es Itze Vera y les quería avisar que tenemos interpretación en español. Ahora, si ven abajo de la pantalla, hay un cono que dice interpretación. Si lo oprimas, van a ver opciones de lenguaje. Hay una opción de inglés y una opción de español. Si prefiere escuchar esta junta en español, por favor, oprima ese canal. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Itze. So at this point, just like to reiterate that this workshop is being held in accordance with the public notice dated July 30th, 2020. As a workshop, the board will not take any formal action, and there will be no sworn testimony or cross-examination of participants. The board members and its staff may, however, ask clarifying questions of speakers after receiving updates and comments at this workshop. The board may provide direction as well to staff regarding future tasks or actions. The purpose of today's workshop is for the board to receive written and oral comments on the status of the Salton Sea Management Program, including a report from state agencies, which we went in greater depth earlier, but today, to the start of this component, we'll just give a quick update as well, but proceed to comments. With that, I would turn it over to Justine Herrig, who will give a brief overview to kind of set the stage, and then look forward to receiving additional public comments. And thank everyone again.
Hi, thank you. So go ahead and bring up my presentation. Awesome. Okay, hello. My name is Justine Herrig, and I'm an environmental scientist, a senior environmental scientist with the State Water Board. I'm tasked with implementing the board's oversight role on the implementation of the Salton Sea Management Program. I may refer to the program as SSMP throughout my presentation. This is the same presentation I gave this morning, and I will be giving it again since it provides context and background information that may support discussions within this evening session of the workshop, especially for those that weren't able to watch the morning session. Also to note, the video of the earlier session will be available online for those who want to watch it because they couldn't watch it earlier today. Likewise, this evening session will be coupled with that one as well. So feel free to tell anybody who couldn't be with us today that they can go to our website and watch the videos there. Next slide, please. So just here's an overview of the topics I'll cover. Conditions at the Salton Sea, background of board actions, the stipulated order, the Salton Sea Management Program's annual report, written comments that were received as part of our workshop, and then conclusions. Next slide, please. So conditions at the Salton Sea. Next slide, please. So here's a table that shows the current information related to water surface elevation at the Salton Sea. So the current water elevation in comparison to the elevation in 2003, there is a 9.5 foot decrease. The graph to the right just provides a visual that confirms the decline in water elevation over that time. The table on the left also notes other parameters like exposed playa and passive revegetation. As a reminder, playa is a term that just refers to exposed lake bed, and passive revegetation is just simply where plants have established without human intervention to aid it along. So the key thing to take from here is just total net exposed playa right now is about 15,840 acres. Next slide, please. Getting to some background of the board actions and ultimately why we're here. Next slide, please. First, I have to go over the Quantification Settlement Agreement, often referred to as the QSA. The QSA was created in order for California to stay within its allocations of Colorado River water. So the QSA was created and then finalized in 2003, which encompasses a collection of agreements intended to settle disputes over Colorado River water use within California. The QSA established budgets for signatories and authorized the contracting parties to pursue water transfers. In particular, the QSA allowed for the long-term water transfer of conserved water from Imperial Irrigation District to urban use in coastal cities. The QSA also prompted the state to undertake the restoration and mitigation efforts at the sea. Next slide, please. Yes, sorry. In anticipation of the QSA, Imperial Irrigation District filed a petition for a long-term water transfer, which was approved by the State Water Board in October 2002. The long-term transfer is for the transfer of conserved agricultural water from Imperial Irrigation District to San Diego County Water Authority, Coachella Valley Water District, and the Metropolitan District of Southern California for a 45-year period with the option for an additional 30-year renewal period. The long-term transfer was revised shortly after it was approved to require IID to supply 15 years of mitigation water to the Salton Sea to maintain the salinity level, while a regional solution was developed to address the public health and environmental concerns. In November 2014, IID filed a petition with the State Water Board seeking modification of the long-term transfer order since the mitigation water was coming to an end and there was no plan or solution in place to address the sea. Next slide, please. Following IID's petition, the Salton Sea Task Force was created and included members of the Governor's Office, the California Natural Resources Agency, California Environmental Protection Agency, the State Water Board, California Air Resources Board, and the Energy Commission. As part of the task force, the State Water Board monitored and assessed progress being implemented for the Salton Sea and held multiple workshops between 2015 and 2017. Next slide, please. So in March 2017, IID filed a motion with the State Water Board, which prompted a draft stipulated order to be developed for consideration by the State Water Board. As a result, the board adopted an order, usually referred to as the stipulated order, which amended the long-term transfer in order to include specific annual acreage milestones to address public health and environmental concerns. Next slide, please. So going into more detail of the stipulated order, next slide. The stipulated order included annual acreage milestones for habitat and dust suppression projects. The table presented here shows each annual milestone from 2018 through 2028. The order required that 50% of the total acreage shall provide habitat benefits for fish and wildlife. And each annual milestone requires an annual report be submitted to the State Water Board. Also to note, the stipulated order does not confer additional enforcement authority to the State Water Board. Next slide, please. The stipulated order added condition 28 to the water transfer order, which requires the State Water Board to hold a public workshop to receive written and oral comments on the status of the Salton Sea mitigation and restoration efforts by the 31st of each year. However, the workshop originally planned on March 18th of this year had to be canceled due to the COVID-19 emergency. Today's workshop still satisfies the public workshop requirement of condition 28. The State Water Board, as part of its oversight role, was selected to hold the annual workshops to provide transparency and provide a public forum for governmental agencies, residents, stakeholders, and other interested parties to provide input on the progress of the state's efforts to mitigate the effects of the receding shoreline. Next slide, please. The order requires a report to be submitted to the State Water Board by the California Natural Resources Agency, and CNRA reported on this in detail earlier at our morning session, but the annual report at a minimum needs to include what projects are completed from the previous year, the amount of acreage of projects completed, upcoming projects, the status of financial resources and permits, anticipated departures from the annual milestone targets, and progress towards development of the long-term plan. Next slide, please. So the annual report for the SSMP for 2019, which was submitted earlier this year. Next slide, please. The annual report, like I said, has to cover those 6 topics, but information was also provided related to project delivery, planning, partnerships, community engagement, and next steps in phase 1 of the SSMP. I do want to note here that one of the actions requested by the board members last workshop was to have the annual report submitted earlier in order to allow more time for people to review. The report was submitted on February 24th, so it was provided much earlier. The annual report is available on the Salton Sea's webpage for California Natural Resources Agency, and it's also available in Spanish as well on their webpage at saltonsea.ca.gov. Next slide, please. So we'll go into written comments that were received. Next slide. So written comments were received in anticipation of the March workshop, which are listed here. We also received another 22 written comments in anticipation for today's workshop. All these comments written comments that were received are listed on the State Water Board's webpage. And if anybody wants copies of a specific letter or all the letters, please contact me to request those documents. Next slide, please. So just to highlight what was said, or not said, but what was included in our morning session for those who could not attend. During the morning session, I provided this presentation that I'm giving to you now. There's also a longer presentation by the California Natural Resources Agency on their annual report that they submitted. We also had 5 panels that provided information from the Colorado River Regional Water Quality Control Board, air quality authorities, local entities, federal entities, wildlife and community NGOs, and we also had a comment period, an open comment period during the earlier session. Next slide, please. So for today's evening session that we're in now, just to overview, after my presentation, we'll have a presentation by California Natural Resources Agency. And after that, we will yield the rest of the time to accommodate public comments. And then once public comments are over, the workshop will come to a close. Next slide, please. So that ends my presentation. Here's my contact information if anybody has any questions about the Salton Sea related to the State Water Board. The State Water Board also has a web page that includes past actions and any future actions that will occur. There's also an email subscription list for the Salton Sea. If anyone wants to stay up to date on those actions, the best place would be to get on that email subscription service. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Justine. Much appreciated. And I think we have next Assistant Secretary Arturo Delgado from the California Natural Resources Agency to present a brief summary of some of the work that the Resources Agency presented earlier. Or perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's Gail. Sorry.
Good evening, Chair Esquivel.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Esquivel and board members. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Gail Severance, and I'm the Salton Sea Program Manager for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. On behalf of Assistant Secretary of Salton Sea Policy for the California Natural Resources Agency, Arturo Delgado, and the Salton Sea team, including the Department of Water Resources, I'm pleased to provide an update on the 2020 annual report of the Salton Sea Management Program. As mentioned, this will be a shorter version of presentation provided earlier today. Despite certain work-related restrictions due to COVID-19, since the release of the 2020 annual report in February, the SSMP team worked diligently toward meeting the requirements of the stipulated order and the vision outlined in the annual report. Next slide, please. Thank you. At the highest level, the Salton Sea Management Program remains focused on and committed to the following priorities: making significant visible progress in implementing the Salton Sea Management Program's Phase 1 10-year plan, which aims to improve conditions around the sea by constructing 30,000 acres of projects to suppress dust from exposed emissive lakebed and create habitat for fish and wildlife. Establishing a long-term pathway for the Salton Sea beyond the 10-year plan. Building the capacity of the SSMP team, and strengthening partnerships with local leaders and communities. Next slide, please. I'd like to walk us through, this is an overview of our game plan, if you will, of the activities and tracks that the program is involved in accomplishing our objectives, both for the 10-year plan and for the Salton Sea long-term plan. First, we have the begin and advance construction on the Species Conservation Habitat Project, 3,770 acres approximately of aquatic habitat and dust suppression. There will be some further details a little bit further on in the presentation, but the Department of Water Resources has undergone a process and identified a successful proposer. Execution of the contract is expected within the next few weeks here, with work to begin in the fall. This will complete several thousand acres of physical dust suppression and restoration projects on exposed lake bed areas. Oh, excuse me. I'm on to the next one. The next one is to complete several thousand acres of physical dust suppression and restoration projects on exposed lake bed areas. You can see that the first project was completed in January of this year. That was 112 acres at Brouchard Road. For December of this year, we would complete an additional 1,500 to 2,000 acres. By March of 2021, an additional 2,000 to 2,500 additional acres. And by the end of 2021, an additional 2,500 to 3,000 additional acres. Next, we are working on the completion of the environmental assessment for the SSMP 10-year plan to provide compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and to facilitate the permitting of all the 10-year plan projects. In August and September of 2020, we will release for public review draft project description and hold public workshops. In winter of 2021, release for public review the draft environmental assessment and hold further public workshops, with completion anticipated in summer of 2021. Then next is to advance the North Lake pilot project. September of 2020, we will execute agreement with Salton Sea Authority to transfer Prop 68 bond funds and advance planning and design of the North Lake pilot project. Fall of 2021, complete regulatory permitting, obtain land use and water supply agreements, and secure construction contracts. In addition, we are working on the long-term plan. And I'll go into that a little bit more below, but that consists of selecting an independent reviewer to do a feasibility analysis of water importation, as well as to develop long-term plan. Next slide, please. I will, I think everyone could go back one slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, one forward, I'm sorry. I'll go over 4 program priorities that we have. One of them is making significant physical progress on implementing the Salton Sea Management Program's Phase 1 10-year plan. Next slide, please. As mentioned above, we are working on advancing construction of the Species Conservation Habitat Project, and we're moving forward at full steam. We received complete proposals this spring from 3 pre-qualified design bid build candidates. Evaluation of these complex proposals has been completed, and Kiewit Infrastructure West Company has been selected as the best value design build entity. As I mentioned, the Department of Water Resources is in the process of finalizing the contract, and initiation construction this fall will be a notable milestone for the SSMP. Next slide, please. Additionally, working on making progress for completion of several thousand acres of dust suppression and restoration projects at the Salton Sea. We have up here the dates of the timelines. The agencies held a series of 5 public meetings from the end of last year through the spring, and held a 30-day public comment period on an initial draft of the Dust Suppression Action Plan, and then released a final living document in July following discussion with air quality authorities, major landowners, and tribes, including tribal consultation. That revised plan is now available on the CNRA Salton Sea website, saltonsea.ca.gov. This updated plan outlines 9,800 acres of project planning areas on exposed lakebed or on the sea, and will be refined over time through continued collaboration and public workshops, working with local air districts, and monitoring and adaptive management. Our team is ready to start delivery of what will be the first of several thousand acres of dust suppression and restoration projects identified in the plan. We're actively coordinating with federal and local partners to meet regulatory requirements, obtain necessary permits, and negotiate land access agreements. The team is also increasing its project delivery capacity through contracting and agreement process to acquire equipment and construction services to expedite project implementation. First project in the queue is a temporary dust suppression project located within the footprint of the SCH project. The reason we are proactively implementing temporary dust control measures at the site prior to the start of construction of the habitat ponds is due to the potential for emissivity within portions of the project area. Permitting is completed, and the team is working with the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District to obtain approval that will enable work to begin. Next slide, please. These slides demonstrate some of the dust suppression and restoration projects under consideration. Temporary surface roughening, if approved as part of the DSAP, is temporary and would be followed by restorations such as vegetation restoration, shallow water, etc. Next slide. Shallow flooding is another option, and sand fencing. Next slide. As well as stormwater spreading. Next slide. We're going to go to the next slide. There we go. Thank you. And then making progress on the environmental planning for the SSMP 10-year plan projects, as mentioned above. Working closely with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is the lead federal agency for NEPA. And this will provide comprehensive NEPA compliance for all of the 10-year plan projects, including but not limited to additional aquatic habitat around the Salton Sea project, the SCH project, and the Alamo River. The North Lake project, including the 156-acre North Lake pilot project, and additional dust suppression and restoration projects on exposed lake bed. Mentioned some timelines earlier. Next slide, please. Another priority is establishing a long-term pathway beyond 10-year plan. Next slide, please. The state has issued 2 requests for proposals in February and June for an independent reviewer to conduct a feasibility study of water importation proposals. However, unfortunately, no proposals were received in response to these RFPs. So we're currently exploring further options to secure an independent reviewer to conduct this analysis and plan to have a reviewer on board this fall. Next slide, please. Priority, building the capacity of the Salton Sea team. Next slide. Despite the impacts of COVID-19 on the state budget, in a demonstration of continued commitment to Salton Sea restoration, the governor and legislature have approved the addition of 10 staff new positions dedicated full-time to implementing the SSMP. This is a high-level draft organization chart. To be noted that of these 10 positions, 8 will be located in the local area. 2 positions with CNRA, a new Deputy Assistant Secretary, and notably a public information officer to oversee robust community engagement locally. This position will be located locally. DWR will have a new CEA to oversee an attorney position, a supervising engineer, 2 senior engineers, and an air resources engineer. And CDFW will add a senior environmental scientist supervisory and fish and wildlife technician. In addition, 3 previously vacant staff positions were filled in the last 4 months. Next slide, please. Further in building capacity is to establish temporary local Salton Sea offices at the Worcester unit of the Imperial Wildlife Area. Its location is shown there on the map. This will increase our local presence and supplement our office in Bermuda Dunes. It's centrally located to current and future habitat and air quality projects, as we'll see in a minute here. It's a state-owned public facility, so has efficiencies of cost. And finally, it has a short lead time compared to other options such as leasing commercial office space, which could take up to 2 years through our, as we're required to go through our state. Next slide, please. And this shows the distance of Worcester from key project areas and locations. For example, 20 miles from the New River and the Species Conservation Habitat area. See other areas there, as well as distances to local communities, Bombay Beach, Brawley, Westmoreland, El Centro, and others. Next slide, please. Finally, strengthening partnerships. Next slide, please. Community engagement. We're developing in collaboration with the SSMP Engagement Committee. A subcommittee is assisting us in finalizing the engagement plan, which we presented at the September meeting. Working group is also assisting us with NEPA public workshops, as mentioned above. And we're working on streamlining the SSMP advisory committee structure. And finally, we've been providing ongoing updates with the SSMP e-newsletter and dedicated website. I encourage you to visit the website and you can sign up for the listserv if you haven't already. Next slide, please. We've actively been engaging with various partners. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with the Salton Sea Authority for coordination on the broader goals of Salton Sea restoration and collaboration on federal funding opportunities. We've also entered into an MOU with the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District, outlining coordination collaboration on the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Project, proposed to refill channels located between residences on the Salton Sea shoreline in the disadvantaged community of Desert Shores. Imperial County Air Pollution Control District will lead efforts to plan the project and act as project manager. The NRA will analyze and document the project's public benefits as part of the upcoming 10-year plan NEPA, as required for funding under the SSMP. We also continue coordination and collaboration with various stakeholders and partners to conduct important fish and bird surveys, as is with water quality sampling and other data collection efforts. Next slide, please. In closing, on behalf of the Salton Sea Management Program team, we're proud to report on the continuing progress since February 2020 submittal of our annual report, despite the unique challenges brought on by the COVID pandemic. Our team is laser focused. We've scaled up efforts to make significant progress, deliver several thousand acres of priority projects in the months ahead. Same time, we're developing a path forward for long-term restoration. We're significantly enhancing our organizational capacity. And finally, most importantly, we are strengthening partnerships with local leaders and communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Ms. Severance. I think all the board members heard most of this earlier, so I don't think there's any additional question, but if there is, board members should feel free to chime in. I think at this point, we can move to public comment. I'm seeing only 3 actual commenters here, and so I just want to check in with the clerk of the board if that's the case, and if so, great. Each commenter can have 5 minutes, and we can begin to call folks up.
That is all that I have at this point right now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I would like to call up Jenny Binstock with the Sierra Club. Hello, Ms. Binstock.
Hi, how are you?
Well,
Thanks.
this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks. So, yep, my name is Jenny Binstock. I'm a senior campaigner for the Sierra Club, and I work on public lands issues across California, closely with our Sacramento team, our chapters, and in coalition with NGOs and community groups who are all working towards a future for the Salton Sea where the environment and communities can thrive together. Just want to say thank you to the Water Board for making sure this meeting happened after, the March situation, to CNRA, to all the contributions of panelists and participants today. I was able to join for a bit and appreciate that this is a long day for everyone. Also want to thank the state for actions to advance project planning, secure new funds for projects and staffing, improve community engagement efforts. This is really great momentum. And it cannot be stated enough, as many people have said, that 2020 is a critical year for action here at the Salton Sea. I don't know if you all saw a recent article in The Intercept that I hope you have seen that referenced the situation at the Salton Sea as, quote unquote, a perfect storm of environmental neglect, poverty, and the coronavirus. And this grim reality really presents us with an opportunity to sincerely embrace that restoring the Salton Sea is a moral obligation to invest in the well-being and resilience of an entire region that lacked critical investments far before there was a pandemic to contend with. So a few areas I want to quickly uplift. We urge the state, for those reasons, to look at opportunities for multi-benefit projects that improve community well-being and increase access to nature, which is a fundamental human right. Residents continue to uplift the need for basic infrastructure like walking paths, lighting, and community gathering spaces that can deliver these long overdue investments. It's positive to see that North Shore has been included in the DSAP to ensure more projects at the northern part of the sea are flagged for these types of projects. It's still a bit concerning that this is still considered an exploratory phase 2 project and would lag in implementation, from what I understand. So pilot projects could be a great way to more quickly address health needs while testing, opportunities for multi-benefit infrastructure. Moving on, just on the ecosystem health aspect, we feel a species conservation habitat project would benefit from greater clarity around how much it would cost annually to maintain, monitor, and manage the project once it's constructed, as well as who will be responsible for monitoring and management. We also believe there could be greater details provided for how habitat projects are being planned, what sort of benefits will be gained for which species of birds, and how success will be measured to ensure that projects maximize those impacts for ecosystem health. And lastly, as I know has been discussed a lot today, the foundation of all this work must be very strong community engagement. All the efforts by CNRA to improve community engagement are really appreciated, including the working group that's been referenced, which I've appreciated the opportunity to participate in. And I just want to emphasize it's really important that there's a clearer feedback loop between community members and the state that goes beyond just documenting the engagement process or stating that community input has been incorporated, but actually showcases specifically how that feedback is being incorporated into projects and explains why or why not. A more clearly defined process for incorporating input into the design stage of projects is an excellent way to build relationships, trust, ensure that projects really benefit the people that are a part of the Salton Sea. And I think this has maybe been uplifted, but an idea of holding quarterly meetings as regular engagement opportunities for communities is a great way to provide regular updates on the status of the SSMP and what the opportunities are for input, and really looking forward to learning more about the timeline and strategy for staffing local positions and the vision for how they'll engage communities, and hopeful that that can maybe be something that's considered. And that's all I wanted to uplift. Thanks so much for the opportunity to comment.
You as well. Great comments, Ms. Binstock, and thank you for tuning in today and summarizing what is a lot of the great discussion that has gone on and been very community focused. I think we're hearing that loud and clear, and I think that there's ways that we as state agencies can continue to make easier to understand just where, not just where and when and the sort of checkbox of kind of checking in, but really how to engage and how to think about the projects and the discussions happening. So thank you, really appreciate that. Okay, great. Next, we have on my list here, Dania de Roman.
Hi.
Hello, good evening.
My name is Dania de Ramon. I'm a community member, and I'm just here today to say that I think it's very important that the health of community residents living around the Salton Sea continue to be our top priority, especially with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that's disproportionately impacting communities who live around poor air quality and also amongst hazardous health conditions. Which can be clearly seen with the recent spikes in COVID cases within Riverside and Imperial County. This adds another added layer of urgency to protect those who are already disproportionately experiencing health issues linked to the Salton Sea's air quality. Because it is these communities who are experiencing the direct and disproportionate effects of this global pandemic, there really needs to be a clear, transparent, and most importantly, accessible process for communities to provide input on the planning and implementation of projects, and to ensure that there's like a feedback loop that demonstrates how this community feedback is being incorporated. And the state really needs to be transparent and must take active steps to seek the input of and engage community members, because at the end of the day, it's the community members who are the ones who bear the effects of any project that is planned and implemented. And lastly, I just want to say that I appreciate the progress that the California Natural Resources Agency has made on the SSMP, today, and also just thank you for making the effort to ensure that this workshop occurred after being delayed back in March. That was it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate the great comments. Next, we have, and last would be Joan Taylor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Chair Esquivel and board members, my name is Joan Taylor. I am a Palm Springs resident and serve on the state's Salton Sea Long-Term Plan Committee. I have a couple brief comments and questions on that subject. First, this long-term plan committee hasn't met for quite some time, which is raising the question, does CNRA intend to convene this committee? And if so, when? CNRA has indicated it contemplates reorganizing various Salton Sea advisory committees. But since the future of the Salton Sea is so important to both environmentalists and residents throughout Southern California because of its huge ecological and health implications, disbanding this critical committee, which really represents a very broad range of stakeholders, would be a grave error. Secondly, CNRA has evidently reached an impasse, having twice failed to engage any independent experts to evaluate a water import proposal. Yet evidently it intends to try again with no indication of why the third time would be the charm. We might hope so, but perhaps the state itself needs to determine the scale and feasibility of an import scenario or scenarios of different scales. We do understand the urgency to build the near-term projects and applaud the administration for the great strides made to resolve some easements and other long-term problems. But it's important to know what exactly is CNRA's backup strategy for evaluating water import and for finally promulgating a long-term plan in time to meet the December 2021 deadline on the Water Board order. That's all I have. Thanks very much for your time and oversight on this important issue to all of us.
Thank you for your good comments, Ms. Taylor. And we have heard this several times, a need to better understand how the long-term planning and discussion is engaged with. As you noted, there were previous committees like the long-term plan committee and the science committee as well, I think. Was another out there that, and I think rightfully so, in the sort of refocusing. At this point, it seems outreach is one of the more central ones. But I think that it is important that it's either, whether it's the reconstitution, it seems, of these previously existing long-term committees, or the reconstitution and kind of reframing, whatever it may be. I think it is important that, and have continued to hear some importance around having a little certainty around the process on the long-term plan. And noted that I think we heard from Resources Agency some thinking around that, which, yes, at this point, I think is with an evaluation of those existing long-term plans that were put on the table. But I think there still kind of leaves a larger process discussion there. So thank you for that again, Ms. Taylor, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of then the evening component of public comments. I really do appreciate that we took the time and effort and resources to do this. Again, it's really hard for everyone to be able to attend during the day. I think there's obviously a lot going on, and when we anticipated this, I think it's that in-person sort of opportunity to check in. I think this is just as important. And even though I think we have again just 3 commenters here, was still more than worth the while. But I guess now it leaves us with a little bit of moment with us as board members to discuss if there's any specific direction or thoughts or reflection that we have as we kind of wrap up our discussions here this evening. And if there isn't much, that is okay too. It can be preserved for another moment to give direction, but just want to make sure that I did provide the opportunity for board members. Board member Dodak.
This has been said earlier, but I will add my thanks to those expressed by my colleagues, to everyone who participated, not just today, but day after day, month after month, and year after year on this effort. This has been truly a labor of love for the communities down there, and as well as a show of commitment by the administration, by Secretary Crowfoot, and everyone involved. I really appreciate getting the updates today, seeing how far we've come, seeing how much there is left to do, but seeing that there's a plan in place, there are milestones in place, there are definite steps being outlined. So I really appreciate that. I will just make one request. We heard a lot today, and I think one of the speakers, summed it up very efficiently as 3 critical needs, water, 3 critical problems: water, salt, and toxics. And that all is part of the SSMP and things that are being worked out. But the one thing that I would like to request is with respect to that 3rd issue, we've heard before the concerns raised about water quality and about the regional water boards and the ongoing work on standards and TMDLs and all that. And I know resources are tight, and I know that we always have to prioritize. Regional boards always have to prioritize. But what I would like to request, and following up to today, is for our staff to work with Executive Officer Paula Rasmussen and see if there is something we can do, some help we can provide, any way to speed up some of those standards and TMDL efforts. That is something that is definitely within our bailiwick. And I don't have a solution, but I know from experience that we have in the past offer, if nothing else, technical assistance and some staff resources. Again, I know things are tough right now, but I would at least ask that staff has that discussion and perhaps explore some options for providing the regional board with some support.
Thank you for that, Board Member Dodak. I agree. I think that we should explore, again, how do we actually specifically resource the good work the regional board, as we've heard several times, needs to do, is to support these projects to ensure that the beneficial uses of these future habitat projects, let alone the existing beneficial uses down there, are protected. I want to quickly note that Patricia Neal, you have your hand up, and so we can recognize you in case you are looking to say something in addition, and also Rebecca Zaragoza from Leadership Council. Glad to recognize you guys if you would like to speak further. So I think Patricia Neal, you should be invited to share your camera and/or microphone.
Yes, hi everyone. This is Patricia Leal. I was here earlier a part of the panel. Yes,
Sorry,
my last name.
sorry, I'm sorry that you're misidentified here. So good to see you again, Patricia.
No, no worries. Thank you so much for having me. I think I just want to really elevate again my appreciation for having this workshop today. I think I was able to communicate closely with Justine to support on ensuring that community residents were able to join. And I think in future workshops, we would very much continue to support on the engagement and making sure that the materials are provided beforehand in Spanish. And I know in the future as well, looking and exploring at other languages as well. So I think this provides an opportunity. You know, these workshops are required at least once a year. So I think every year we can definitely work together to ensure that the process becomes easier. I know for this time around, Zoom and just, you know, connecting virtually, I know it requires passcodes and just connecting and, you know, making sure you do the online form and whatnot. But I think we can identify different ways to make it more accessible and easier for community residents to provide direct comments as well. And in addition to that, I just wanted to add, as we look at not only the North Shore area, and I think for us, it's been important to really uplift these communities because they're adjacent to the Salton Sea. People live here, people breathe the air here. As it was expressed in the morning, the smell of rotten egg is just one of the many odors that you see and experience in the North Shore area. So I think just really looking at the North Shore pilot project and the DSAP and the opportunities there, how do we ensure better communication and just engagement right from the very beginning, from the scoping process to the design to the implementation. I think, you know, community has been very vocal about their needs, about the urgency of action, and it's a matter of engaging and giving decision-making power to community residents that can better inform the decisions that we plan for the future and long term. So we really want to express my gratitude, but also looking forward to supporting on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Definitely, you know, we're in learning mode, I think, here, and really glad to have the opportunity to begin with to be experimenting, if you will, in these platforms. And I think to your point, making it easier, lowering the bar, making it a little more understandable, and not as and for us, there is, you know, process so as we can be, you know, be able to keep things orderly at the meeting. But I think there are still ways that we can continue to improve the clarity and the communication, and to your point, the preparation materials for both this workshop and all of the board's work, which I think is really being, I think, incredibly infused and has a lot of leadership coming out of our Office of Public Participation around this work. So I'm glad that Itze and Adriana and others have been able to really professionalize and bring us to another level here, particularly with this workshop. I'm looking forward to lessons then again for all of our work. But to your point, once a year, at least for this moment, really prepare, have materials ahead of time and that are bilingual and appropriate. And so just thank you. And thank you for sticking with us the entire day and your continued contributions. Look forward to more discussion.
I just have something to add on that and really appreciate, Patricia, you calling this out, and also about easier ways to access. This is an issue that we as a board are really wanting to improve on. And so I'm just curious, because whenever we have these meetings, they're lengthy, and also we get down in the weeds. And I think we need to get down in the weeds. It's a way for us to move this forward. We need to really stay on top of the details, but sometimes, you know, we might be so detailed that for those that are accessing this through a certain area of concern, it may be somewhat confusing or difficult to follow. And so I would just welcome, I think we would all welcome your input on how we could improve on the materials that are disseminated in advance or as part of these meetings.
Yeah, and I can just briefly respond to it. One way is I know community residents have requested like, hey, can we see this material in Spanish? And I think starting from there is a great place. And then from there, I think the questions are going to come in regards to, is this material understandable or not? But I think just really making it relatable to the community and how it impacts the public health. And, I think that's a great start to begin with. But would be very happy to provide additional comments. And I don't know who the best person would be to send those comments, but I can follow up with Justine and the office as well.
Thank you. Yes. And I would direct you toward our Office of Public Participation as well. And we have your email address here. So what I'll make sure is we send an email to you and we follow up with some direct conversation. So thank you. Really, thank you. Okay, and also Rebecca, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you. And sorry to keep you on a few minutes longer, but again, my name is
Sorry
Rebecca.
about it. That's what we're here for.
Again, my name is Rebecca Zaragoza and I work with Leadership Council. And I just wanted to comment on the progress and improvement that we've seen in the community outreach and engagement work. We definitely appreciate the work that the state team has done on this front and hope to see that continue. However, I do feel that this process can go a bit further if more agency is given to the Community Engagement Committee. I know there are already steps being taken to restructure the committee, but this should include ways that the committee, its chairs and its members can have more authority in influencing that process and the process of actually developing more plans and doing the engagement and supporting in that work. More specifically, though, this would mean providing the formal opportunity for the committee and its chairs to schedule meetings, plan the agenda, develop timelines and tasks for the committee to complete in partnership with the state, and guide the process for following up with the discussions had at the committee meetings. The engagement committee should definitely be meeting more frequently and proactively, working towards clear goals and objectives. Right now, I think we're only meeting once a quarter, and I think we could get a lot more progress done on these plans if we met more regularly. And we hope to see these recommendations included and addressed prior to September's meeting in order to have a more productive conversation, having had time to review the draft plan in advance. And again, we're always happy to help and to be a partner in this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the acknowledgement that there has been good progress, but also recognize with you that we need to continue to do better. And so we, and that includes on the board side and our processes, but we'll certainly communicate what we're hearing here. And there's, as you know, representatives from Resources Agency here listening as well. So I think all of us together, what we can benefit from is better information sharing, best practices sharing when it comes even to just how to hold on these platforms, the best, sort of cogent bilingual discussion that we know is required to be had in the community if we're going to have meaningful engagement. So look forward to lessons learned from us to the Resources Agency and vice versa, and really looking at these resources that we as state agencies use and activate, and muscles we use, if you will, to engage with communities, really be seen as the same activity, which it is. And I think that there's an expectation from communities that irrespective of which state agency it is, that there is this basic level of understanding of how to engage with communities and best practices shared amongst us. And I'm actually quite proud that I think largely I see these last years continues to be a central discussion happening in so many of our agencies. So I'm glad to see this project be a space where we can specifically figure out how best to continue this. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comment? Thank you, and thank you both again, Patricia and Rebecca, for adding some additional thought here. Any other comments from board members? And thank you, Board Member Dodek. Yeah, a conversation again on resources specifically and how we help within our bailiwick, the regional board, do the work of developing TMDLs and the outreach, and as they and particularly pursue their triennial review, help them do this sort of engagement with communities, discussing what their plans are. I think again we have a lot to do within our own bailiwick. So I second your thoughts around figuring out how we get those resources to the region.
And I'll just, because we're talking about regional board. I just thought I would, highlight that, there's the TMDL process, which, is a prolonged and important process, but, there's prioritization that goes on. But also just to note that there's, very concrete ways that the board is working right now on addressing water quality in the tributaries, and is open and appropriate now for lots of public process, because they're in the process of looking at adopting an updated irrigated lands regulatory program for both the Coachella Valley and the Imperial Valley. That's that process is happening now. There's drafts and there's public workshops and such. So encourage folks that are interested in water quality going into the tributaries that end up in the Salton Sea. That's one program where the regional board is actively working now. In addition to others, but where there's a regulatory development process. And there's also, I know, work around the salt and nutrient management plan within the Coachella Valley, at least, and I'm sure there's others as well. But just to note, there's, outside of the larger TMDL process, there's a lot of ongoing work that is implementing those objectives into the regulatory programs and management plans that the region has. So excited to have the regional board's role kind of be highlighted here, and also just encourage all the engagement from folks that are helping to address the needs of the Salton Sea, to also be engaging with the regional board on, and the water boards in general, on particularly on our niche of this whole puzzle.
Thank you, board member. Chief Deputy Bishop, are you here to caution me?
No, I'm just here to say that we heard you, and that staff will look at some alternatives and trade-offs, and come back to you with what we can do and what that will cost us.
Thank you. No, I do appreciate that, and I think, to Board Member Firestone's point, it is, there's a lot certainly that is before the regional board, and there are different ways that we can all engage. Whether it's different programs, but also just I heard a real data need on better just providing water quality data as we consider project implementation, and all the selenium considerations, all of that. So I think there's a lot of space, and to your point, not unlimited funds certainly on our side, but looking to make sure that we use them to the best. And I think that the lens that I continue to hear as well is outcomes for communities. And so really, whether it's best bang for your health buck on air projects and dust mitigation projects, or things like Desert Shores, where there's a water quality component, there's a community component. I think it'll help us all, again, if particularly given the constrained budgets we'll all be seeing, and just the still catching up on acreage. That acreage that does go in should really be, I guess, this real best bang for the buck, and be really tied to community benefits and outcomes.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. And I know we've had a long day, and I already made comments on most of the things. One thing that has resonated with me from this is that we're balancing really the urgency and very concrete crisis that is exacerbated by COVID, and the horrible impacts in particular in this region, but also just the years of that there hasn't been adequate results in action in terms of implementation of the SSMP. But so there's this very immediate, concrete action plan and plan that we have specific milestones for, and we absolutely need to deliver on that. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we're grounding ourselves in what is the big picture goal that we share that we're trying to achieve, and how do we get there, utilizing the plans that we've developed with the SSMP and the resources that we have, but not just looking at, certainly we have to be accountable to the commitments and milestones that we have, but also grounding that beyond just like this many acres acreage, but really around what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve here in collectively in each of our niches. And I do think it's hard to balance those two the resources agency is really gearing, staffing up and trying to make as quick progress as it possibly can to catch up on, where it needs to be, and building up that trust and meaningful engagement and structure. There's so much work to do, and I think it's hard to balance those two things often as we're trying to run forward. So appreciate, I feel like this is continues to be a real challenge, obviously, and an incredibly urgent need for the state. And I do feel like it's encouraging. I'm encouraged by this year and the schedule that folks laid out. But I think there's a lot more to do, and there's, especially this year, there's so many critical pieces within that timeline. And so I really hope that we're coming together next year at this time with a lot of good news and a lot of also just sort of common vision and relationships built around how we're going to where we're trying to get in both concrete and kind of big picture ways. Thanks.
Thank you. Very well said.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed with all that. Great comments. I just want to add, since we're talking about the regional board and we're talking about our responsibilities in terms of water quality, certainly I support Board Member Dodek's request and to look into resources and whatever support we can provide as we're looking at basin planning or TMDLs or whatever the case may be that makes the most sense here. But I also don't want to lose sight of some of the board's other responsibilities, which is permitting. And so on the 401 water quality certification side, we heard earlier today from the Army Corps of Engineers and their efforts in helping support projects and permitting. And so I just want to make sure, where there are trade-offs, and Chief Deputy Director Bishop is going to look into this, but where there are trade-offs and we have to make those tough decisions, we need to be mindful of, the competing responsibilities that we have at the regional board level and the state board level. And that we just keep that in mind and know, that these projects are urgent, they're on a tight time frame, and we need to be ready and able to support with any permitting decisions we need to make promptly as possible. So just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, and did appreciate hearing from the federal agencies and some of their thought on how they're helping create a more comprehensive permitting sort of environment. And I think that we should be mindful, to your point, board member, of our role and ability to contribute to that as well. Yeah, move quickly, but do so appropriately. Thank you. Vice Chair, any closing thoughts from you or anything?
No, it's been a long day and I think everything's been said, so I'll just add my thanks and look forward to next steps. Thank you. Thank you all that participated.
Yes, echo the thanks, and thanks to my board colleagues here for a great day of discussion, and everybody that has participated. Really appreciated hearing a lot, and I think there's a lot for us to digest here. And although it's a once a year workshop and check-in, know that the discussions, the opportunities for continued to Board Member Firestone's point, shared visioning of the work, the opportunities to collaborate, those continue on, and we need to continue to ensure that they happen in real time. The work is too critical down at the sea tonight. With that, I appreciate it. I think, regrettably, our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer, had a bit of bad luck getting on his way back home, so he is not here to what I usually do to just make sure there's nothing I'm forgetting here before we close ourselves out. I don't think there is. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic evening. Stay very safe, please. There's all number of challenges out there I know right now, personally in communities and otherwise, so please do stay safe, and we will talk to you very soon. So thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Thank you.